Everybody, welcome back to the Insiders Lounge. Today we have another episode, and Alan is joining me today. Alan, feel free to introduce yourself, and we'll get things started here.
Thanks, Chad. Yeah, Alan McCann here with Colorado Springs Switchbacks. Looking forward to get going. So, whatever you've got planned, let's rock and roll.
All right, let's do it. I always like to get started with some your first memories around the game. I know everyone sort of has that first memory that they can think back to. So I want to hear your first footballing memory that kind of got you excited about the game and got you involved.
Yeah, two memories really: playing out in the back garden with my dad and my granddad, and then going to games, League of Ireland games. I think the closest one was Shelbourne, probably, that my dad would have brought us to. So they're top of the league right now with League of Ireland, but they were the most, back then, they were the better team. We're talking early 90s. They're the earliest memories, but yeah, it was fairly competitive out in the back garden, but I know for a fact they didn't let us win. So it was even at that age, when you think, oh, I might get a win over my dad or my granddad, no, it just wasn't happening.
We can hear the accent right away. So I got to know, I'm curious, I always like to dive into the childhood, because I think you can learn a lot from someone through their childhood. So I'd love to hear what a typical childhood would look like in Ireland, but also what yours would look like, maybe some interesting sort of background behind who you actually are.
We had a bit of a mix, because grandparents are all from the inner city. Parents are from there, so where they're from is a place called Hill Street and Summer Hill, which is right next to each other, and be classified as fairly rough, and you know, nobody's the richest person in the world there, but loved it and spent a lot of time there. You know, whether it was in Summer Hill or Hill Street, it was you go out and play on the street again, playing football on the street. Where with my grandmother and my mother's side, it was a place called the Flats, like Hill Street Flats. So I guess the equivalent out here is the projects. But yeah, there was a communal kind of where everyone would hang out there washing and put their their clothes on the washing line. And that's where we'd all play football. So if ever a ball hit somebody's washing, you'd have people screaming and shouting at you from the top of the flats, but you didn't care. You just kept playing. And then in Summer Hill, actually, where my grandmother and my father's side had their place, it was in Language Place. It's a really skinny road, kind of closed off, and at the top of the road was a car garage that I think they used to sell cars out of. But whenever the shutters were down, that was the goal. So we'd be smashing the ball out the shutters, and when the shutters weren't down, well, then the glass got it. So yeah, you were getting shouted and screamed at there as well for playing football. But it was brilliant. It was. I think it taught street football definitely is a background that my father would have came up with, his brothers, everyone that they grew up with would have came up with. But our version of street football was a lot less, I guess, competitive. It was more so freedom to make mistakes. When you look back at it now, the kids now are not getting what we got. You know, you're probably, let's say you're 8 or you're 6 and you're playing against a 15-year-old and he's kicking the life out of you. And it was ruthless, you know, even games of heads and volleys, World Cup, all that kind of stuff. It was just great. It was just, that's what growing up was, you know. And then we had moved out to down by, we had 2 houses. So in terms of what we moved to when we were younger. So we moved out to a place down by the church in Donecarney. And then while we were still in school, that's when we moved to the next place. But literally, probably a 10-minute walk is where we moved to. So still the same area. When I say we 2 houses, we did not own 2 houses. Let me be very clear. We were lucky to have one. But that was a big jump in terms of, even at the time, because you're the friends you hang around with on the road change, you know. When you're my younger brother, he I think it would have been easier on him just because I would have been out on the streets more, and you know, you're going around playing with your friends. And at the time, obviously, no mobile phones. You're knocking on doors, looking for people to come out and play, and all that kind of stuff. So that was growing up, and everything was around football still. I used to love, my father played in an over 40s team. Used to love it. You go into the dressing room beforehand, all the smells of a dressing room. You go out, you travel in the back of a car. You're out watching the game, even at the pre-game, you're kicking around with some of the teammates. It's just amateur grown men doing it because they loved it. And then you could see, then the game started and they're kicking the life out of each other and there's fights or there's just everything that amateur football brings, and you just totally fall in love with it. Everything about it. And then post game, they just go back to the pub. It was brilliant. And that was every Saturday. That's what Saturday was. And it was just, then you got in the pub, you got to sit there and listen to grown men talking about football or just talking about life and just slagging each other. So, just falling in love with it. That's where the love of it grew, I'd say. But it started definitely with my granddad and my dad. And then God love my younger brother. Whenever we're out playing football in the backyard, and you go in goal, I'm just smashing shots at you. But it was that's what it was. It was brilliant. I don't think a lot of people get it now. They don't get the chance to play street football until the lights go out, or until the lights go on. Sorry, on the streets, and that's when you had to come home. All those kind of things, it's gone, and I think it's a big chance missed. But yeah, that's what we had growing up.
You always were sort of destined to get into football. You mentioned obviously the culture around you growing up, but also your father and your grandfather, I believe, played professionally. So I'd love to hear sort of the insight in their careers, and then we'll get into your career and kind of the unique aspects of it as well.
Yeah, well, when we spent so much time in my grandfather's house and on my dad's side, and he would always be, whether it was a family function like christenings or New Year's Eve, whatever, the stories always broke out. Big Irish thing to sit there, get drunk, and tell stories. So it was brilliant. So you'd hear all the stories from his time. You'd hear all the names of fantastic players that would have gone on to England and played for Ireland and all that kind of stuff. So then you got to meet them. The more you kind of grew up and got to learn who was who, you actually got to meet them, and then you realise how lucky you were to meet them. And then my dad's side, I suppose, of playing was a bit shorter than my granddad. But then my dad became our coach. When we were really, really young, he was kind of in the background as an assistant, if you want to call it that. It was brilliant. It was just, it also taught me, about timekeeping. I used to hate it at the time, but we would be there, let's say training started at 7. We were there at 5:30. We were there at 5 o'clock, and sometimes it was there helping to put up the nets if it was a game. So on a match day, we'd be there probably 2.5 hours before, because he was just excited to be there. Plus, he was always early, always prepared. There was never a detail he missed, literally. You're sitting in the car, I'm 14, 15, I don't get it still, and you're thinking, what the hell are we here so early for? And then you're talking, the freezing's a cold of Ireland. It's obviously pissing the rain down because that's what Ireland does. And it was just all lessons along the way that never realised along the way that that's what they were. And now, so thankful for it. So thankful for it, because you see so many, even, we've started the academy and stuff like that here. You're seeing the kids out here, but my travels have brought us from Pennsylvania, New York, and all these places, and the kids coming up now, they don't have to do any of that. I mean, setting up nets, they don't have to then take the nets down right after in case they get stolen. All these small, they're rolling up in $250 pairs of boots, and they don't think anything of it, and all the pieces that don't actually matter about the game are now actually a focus. And it's really, you have to kind of reteach the lessons that we grew up with, So lucky. And that's what it was. The two of them being professional in both of their careers allowed me then to just be around. I couldn't get enough of it. Didn't know what I was learning at the time, but now Probably 2 years after I left to come to the States is when I realised how lucky I was to learn all those things. Along that, with all the coaches I had coming through, how lucky I was to have them too, because it was actually from each coach you got to learn something that helped in the career now. I wish I had learned them when I was playing. I was too stupid at the time, too stubborn. And that's their careers obviously then has helped us. So football in Dublin and Ireland is a really small community. So because of their careers, I think it helped along the way, only so far, but you got to know people quicker and easier, and there was always a reference point. You're Maxi's grandson, you're Ray's son, that kind of stuff. But then, on certain days we're all shite, and on certain days we're very good, and it was never held against me or for me. You kind of, I remember my dad saying earlier on, because my granddad played with Shamrock Rovers, it was a big part of his career, and my father didn't want to go there because then he'd always be Maxi's son. I'm sure that was a big nuisance or burden or the heavy weight of it, I'm sure. He was only mentioned that a couple of times, but that's why he chose another club. He went to Bows, So that's what their two careers and them being professionals has meant to me coming through. And it's just amazing. Just got so lucky, genuinely.
Those lessons that you speak of, and you mentioned how it's sort of difficult to portray them now with the kids and the youth at the levels, for example, in your academy now. I'm curious how you actually managed to do that. That would be an interesting sort of standpoint to see. Look, they're obviously coming from a little bit more of a wealthy background. The setup is much better where, like you said, the nets are already up, the fields are much better. How do you still bring those lessons into today's world and help those kids understand, this is the reality of the football industry, and these are things that you need to take with you for the rest of your career?
We have a great example in the building in Dylan Clark. And Dylan Clark has been a chance for us to teach everyone around of what to be. His attitude is unmatched. It's unmatched. By far the hardest trainer, top 2 to 3, even with our first team, hardest trainer every single day. There's not a day that he could. There'll be days, obviously, with every single player, the quality will drop, but using him as an example, first of all, of what to be, and the mental toughness he shows, as well as perseverance through, because he struggled a lot when he first came into the first team. He was a fish out of water and he was sinking, but the mental toughness to come back and the willingness to learn, you could never deter him, so there's been more talented players that have come through the academy that have popped up to the first team, and they're no longer with us. They couldn't match that. Or they felt like, I played well yesterday, so I can take 2 days off. Not actually off, but what happened in those 2 days? You went missing, And then we use the examples of what not to be, and we've had them as well. And moments of failure, whether it's for an individual or for the group. People over here anyway seem to, and probably a little bit in Ireland, they seem to panic around failure. Whereas, especially when you're very, very young, I think it's a perfect moment to land all these lessons. If a kid is late, right, well, give me the circumstances, why? All right, if it happens once, here's what we expect at this level. But then if you start actually creeping into 2, 3, 4 times and there's always an excuse with it, right, well, you're nailed, you're gone. Good luck to you. You're lucky to be here in the first place. Whereas if it's once and that's it, okay, never let that happen again, and then forever they're always on time, or they get up 15 minutes early, or whatever it is. They're just small examples, but that's how we land them. And then on the field, talking about being brave and talking about moments where realistically it's a chance to get the ball in the man. I know that's again a small example, but it's a physical game. A USL Championship, if you're a young kid, they'll test you physically. They'll test you mentally, and if you get whacked in the first minute and you panic and you crumble, you're gone, and your career might be gone. If you don't stand up for yourself in these moments. So again, Dylan we've worked. Dylan's been a great example because he's now become a more of a leader with our youth academy when he plays in those games, and with those, we have a summer group there that played a lot of friendlies against the college level players, and he's become a standout. He's knocked on the door for Open Cup and all that kind of stuff as well. He's got his minutes last year, but that's how we get those moments to land, because I think it's imperative. And then we've also got a staff here, pardon me French, we don't take shit. We're not going to listen to the excuses, and we're not going to say, my example I use all the time is, you're not going to hear the typical instruction, if you want to even call it instruction, that I hear in a lot of youth fields around the country. And all it is, good job, Johnny. Yeah, but Johnny's been shite. He's not working hard. Or he is all the controllables he's really bad at. Controllables being body language, work ethic, effort, how he talks to his teammates. When the coach talks to him, does he actually give eye contact, or is he too big time to receive information because mom and dad told him he's amazing and he has $400 pair of boots? No, it's not going to last here. So honestly, none of those players have lasted here. None of them. Literally, not one. And I'd say the last piece we've used is lads who've come up to the first team, dropped off, so we've sent them back down. And then maybe in 3-4 months' time again, they've kicked on to be really good again. So they've come back up to the first team. So it's never a final decision, especially in the ages of we've lads between 16 to 20 that have been coming up and coming down for the first team sessions, and it has to land that the first team session is a reward. Now you've got the reward. Now you have to stay there. Now then when you stay there, then you got to kick on to actually get a contract. So there's all these steps that you can actually use to teach, whether it's football lessons or life lessons. There's been a few good home truths, life lessons, and I think that's a big advantage of our building. We have staff, myself included, that are willing to be told, you weren't good today, or you are brilliant today, or but nobody's sitting here patting each other on the back. And also though, when we went through the tough of we started 0-5. Good, honest conversation. Nobody's hitting a panic button. It's right, okay, let's look at it practically. What needs to be fixed? Who's not pulling their weight? All that kind of stuff. And then as a group, we move forward with it. So that's a very long-winded answer, but there's actually a lot of thought that goes into it and getting those lessons to actually land.
Yeah, because I think in the leadership role with youth today, you're mentioning that way of sort of translating those ideas into practical advice for today is the only way. A, you'll build a successful club, but also B, build youth and actually develop them in a longer process.
First, yeah, but there's actions to the words. Mm-hmm. There's no point in you telling me how great you are,
because then you never know when you're actually good. If you're constantly hearing this, oh, you're doing well, you're doing well, you're doing well, then when you're actually doing well, there's no balance between the two.
Yeah, and the reverse, if all you're told is you're terrible, 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 that's not good enough, not good enough, not good enough, without a why, without then the example of what is good enough, so certain principles for us at Switchbacks would be different, let's say, for any other club in America, any other club in USL. So if we have a Switchbacks profile of a right winger and it's not going so well in the game, we can't just say not good, not good, not good. We have to explain what we expect in the pressing cues. We have to explain what we want from them tactically, both on and off the ball. We have to explain what we believe it means to be brave. So bravery on the ball to actually lose it, to make a mistake, but then recover. The second you've lost the ball, can you recover? Small little things like that. There's no point in saying good job all the time or terrible job all the time without why. Like, what's the point? The kid, nothing ever lands and there's no information ever translated, Yeah,
you're spot on there. I want to go and dive back into your career because I find it quite interesting. You grow up in Ireland, but you end up playing collegiately in the US, and obviously that's not a common pathway. So I want to hear sort of those years of those transition years. I'm curious the inspiration behind going to the US. Where'd you get the idea from, and how did that transition go for you?
Potluck. honestly, potluck. I was doing at the time, once I left school, I was doing a course. Basically, it's with the Football Association of Ireland, and it's a year's program to build you up to be a pro. But they also give you gym instruction, swimming, lifeguard lessons. So they give you other avenues if the sport doesn't work out for you. And you're getting paid fairly low, but you're still learning how to be it. But you're also attached with one of the League of Ireland clubs at the time. So I was with St. Pat's. And I had broken through with the 21s, with the reserves, and then kind of brought up training with the first team, making bench appearances, and then there was a change in management from Johnny Mack to who came in after that? Jeff Kenna came in after that, and then after that, I kind of just I had a knee injury, kept me out for about 4 months, and then it kind of just fizzled a little bit, and you were thinking, oh, is football actually going to be for me? And then I got a text off one of the lads that I had played with saying, what do you think? There's another course in Ireland called collegiate, and it's another year's program, but you do your SATs, and you do other things in there as well. Like you can be the first qualification to be a PE teacher and all that kind of stuff. But that's actually set up for you to come to America, to come to the universities in America. And then they do a trip, I can't remember when it is, let's say February or March, to come. You go to Memphis and you play in the tournament at the Mike Rose complex, and you play against University of Memphis, and all these colleges come out and watch. So that's how it started. Got lucky enough to get an offer. Stupidly enough, knew nothing about. By the way, I was awful in skill. Awful, right? Now I have 2 masters out here. I don't know how that happened, but I was awful in skill, right? So I'm on the way. I'll give you a story. I'm on the way to training with the first team, St. Pat's. I've done my SAT, and it wasn't good. It was enough to get in, right?
Right.
So I'm talking with the University of Memphis at the time, and there's a scholarship offer. Their coach, Richie Grant, had flown out at Christmas to speak to my parents in the house, in my house in Ireland. And so everything's a go. It looks like everything's a go for that. He calls me up and he says, could you redo the SAT? I need you to get to this score so we can do the academic scholarship as well as the athletic scholarship. Again, stubborn, not knowing. I'm on, it's called the Lewis in Ireland, the tram. I just went, nah, I'm not going to redo that. Because honestly, in my head, I was lucky to get what I got. And I think I got like 960. I don't know what the scores are anymore. This was 16 years ago. 9 something, let's say. And it was just nah. So then because of that, and because I didn't do a science and stuff, and then it got complicated with NCAA, I couldn't go to University of Memphis. So then we went to Lambeth University, an hour away, where Richie could come and watch us. Keep it myself and Conor Hurley, the goalkeeper, I came over with. But we came late. We nearly didn't come at all. Mark McKeever, who's at One Knoxville, was at Young Harris just starting out. And when it looked like it was all going to collapse, he then called and offered for us to go there. But then, turned out went to Lambeth. Loved it. Honestly, loved it. It was just like Ireland in Tennessee. There were so many Irish lads, which I think helped me massively in landing in. I was a real homebird. And Tennessee and Dublin are just polar opposite. Jackson, Tennessee. But we did well. Loved the team. Would have stayed there. And then University of Memphis bought it out. So still wasn't NCAA D1 eligible. So then I ended up transferring to where Hogan was, our sporting director now. He was at a D2 in Albany, in New York. Again, because a lad I played with was there, Alan McCann. He was already there, another Irish guy. And he said, yeah, come on out. I just saw, honestly, this is how stupid I was. I saw New York and I saw the scholarship offer and said, yeah. Didn't look, I swear to God, did not ever look at the team's record. Didn't look at where they were. None of that. No, and only for his name was on the emails. That's how I knew who the coach was. just an idiot, right? And got there and realised Albany's about 2.5 hours from Manhattan. You realise that very quickly. So I'm landing JFK to Penn Station, where all the trains and buses are, and then a bus up, and I've got about 5 or 6 bags with me. I don't know how I got through. And then I was there first year. I had trouble with the NCAA anyway, but I actually tore my hamstring, so it kept me out for the year. But then you're looking at it and you're thinking, oh my God, the team's awful. The record, I think maybe there was one win that year. It was shocking. The behaviours off the field. Now it was a team in transition. Hogan was a big part of it, turning around. And then the second year, kind of a lot of lads graduated, and they brought in kind of younger players that they planned on being the future for the next 4 years. So captain the year, played. It was awful. It was terrible. Hogan was a big saving grace and gave me some good life lessons along with football lessons. A few lads there that are still friends today, good lads, you know. Brought one of the boys that was really good from Lambeth, Colombian lad, Juan. Brought him, but then he got hurt and I couldn't play with him. But yeah, he ended up doing really well for them as well. But then NCAA came back and said, no years of eligibility even for D2. So then got lucky and actually went spring break, went to West Palm Beach to see my wife now. She wasn't obviously at the time. Went to visit there, and the coach put an offer in front. But I had already got a really good offer from Rio Grande in where are they? Ohio, I think, but a top NAIA program, like top. So I was actually all ready to sign, and the only thing I hadn't done was sign the scholarship agreement. I was going to sign it after spring break, and then the coach in West Palm gave me a better offer, and obviously West Palm at the time. Here's where my thought process was: it was easier to get home to Dublin from Orlando. It was one flight. That's what dictated nearly every move. It was easier then for me to get home for people to come out, and it was cheaper.
Not the beach or the girlfriend.
No, like my miss is a huge factor, but it was 2 to 3 flights to get back from Ohio, or I know I'm butchering wherever it is, and I apologise, but it was a nightmare to get back because obviously we'd go home every Christmas and things like that, and then people were coming out. But I'd a friend and his parents worked for Aer Lingus, so they could get all the lads out easy on flights to Orlando. It was mad. But then got there, and then there was eligibility problems with the NAIA. It was mental. So I actually played in the alumni game there against the first team, scored, and the head coach was pissed, and had to go through that year just kind of being a training player on the sideline. Then with about, 5 games left or 4 games left, they said you're eligible to play. So you could choose to play that year or wait and play a full year next year. So it's a no-brainer. So I waited and played the next year. Captain that year, did well. We got to national tournament, did all that kind of stuff. And it was brilliant. And then went from that December as a player to the January coaching. So it all changed from then.
I was saying earlier, I listened to your pub talk, and you said if you never became a coach, you'd probably be in jail. So I'm curious, was coaching always the plan? Like, was that just the obvious next step, or what was sort of your thought pattern at the time? Because you mentioned right then that you sort of just transitioned right away into it.
No, do you know what's mad? People had said to me, I still remember lads in West Palm saying to me, this will be you soon. So there was a training game or something. I think I was injured or I was being held out. I don't know what it was, but for some reason I had to coach a team in training. And a couple of the lads had said, this will be you soon. So other people seemed to see it before I did. Do you know that way? With my dad being a coach, and maybe it was meant to be, but not in my head. So I was actually still which they were brilliant people. Because I'd been back and forth with the Reading owners even since having played there with Troy and with Art, and I reached out to Troy about advice. Do I go into coaching because it was offered, or do I stay playing? And his advice was, well, if you come out of the game as a player, it's always very, very hard to get back in. Try and stay in it as long as you can. So I was actually full steamboats ahead to go and do Rochester Rhinos. I was actually supposed to fly out, and there was a contract put in front, and then the coach in West Palm just put a master's in front. So put a year of working once I finished my degree, which would have been the following May. A year's working straight away as a coach, and after that a master's, which I felt in the long run, I honestly didn't even want the master's. I didn't even want to finish high school. Did not. I didn't. Thankfully, I was talked out of that. But then that made total sense at the time. There was probably about 6 months of that last year of playing. I wasn't sleeping right. The injuries were waking up in the middle of the night. I was just sick of it. Taking painkillers to play, to train. I was sick of it. I was strapped up it was a nightmare. But it would feel fine during, but the warm up and then after you were in bits. All because I didn't take care of my body when I was younger, So it wasn't the intention at all. It was never planned long term, but it has worked out for the best, absolutely. And that first year was one of the best things, although I hated it. I really hated it. It was one of the best things that had happened for lessons for future.
If we look back at younger Alan in that first coaching role, what did he do better then than you do now? I think it's always an interesting reflection to kind of look back and see. I'm sure there was something that you could see that like Alan was either more adaptable or there was something about him then that you can reflect back now and sort of use that as inspiration.
I could still pop into the session and not be dead for 5 days after. That's number one. I'd say just the probably the creativity of the drills. Now, whether they were applicable to us winning on Saturday or not, it's difficult. But you think there has to be all these bells and whistles, when you first get into it. But I wasn't always a bells and whistles fella. It was for me. It was, is it improving the individual? Which if you improve the individual, it's improving the group. Was my thought process. So there was more creativity because you didn't know any better. Do you know what I mean? I was given kind of free rein to implement sessions in whatever way, shape, or form. There was no kind of, hey, we want to do this on the weekend. So especially in the spring, it was just freedom to implement everything. So I'd say the creativity. Now there's a body of work of a lot of stuff we've used in the past, which you've either outgrown or you continue to use because it's applicable to this opponent on Saturday or the group that we have now. This fits them and it's a really good one. Like today for us, they had 4 days off. So the reintroduction day, we felt they've got to switch back on. We've got to get a lot of touches in the warm-up, get them switched on mentally, physically. They need more touches again, more kind of forced actions of repeated touch, whether it's one touch or two touch. And then another one we put on top of that with then a finishing action with some competition, and then they play it. So the two of the drills we did today, we did in pre-season, which we knew they would be applicable for today. Whereas when I was younger, I wouldn't have had that body of work of all these drills that we could reflect back on. So you had to get more creative. Okay, what would work today? And what was really poor at when we were young was logging the sessions to actually then reference back on. They were all wrote down. So I'd have to be scrolling through these handwritten books, But yeah, I'd say that was what was better.
When I was looking through sort of your coaching career, the Reading United time really stood out to me. Because at the time it was sort of part of the pathway at Philadelphia Union, which was a bit unique at the time. So I'd love to dive into that. And also, I was looking through some reports and I saw that there's roughly around 50 players during your time there that had used that as sort of a platform to go to pro, and that's extremely impressive while you were there. So I want to hear sort of what makes you think that was such a good pathway for those players, and I would love to hear more of sort of the Philadelphia Union pathway at the time.
The attachment to the Union was the biggest attraction, I would say. They knew, and if I was recruiting you from day one on the phone, I would explain the pathway. Okay, if we play on Saturday, if you're in the 18, great, you're going to earn that throughout the week. But even if you're not in the 18 that week and you've been doing well in training, you'll go up and train. At the time was Bethlehem Steel. So two of the previous Reading coaches were in charge of that program. Then if you were doing really well there, well then Jim Curtin would be taking you up to the first team, which happened every single year. And depending on how well they did there would be depending on how many or how frequently they were invited back. So you're getting, at the time, straight out of an NAIA program, D2, D1, D3, we didn't care. We'd recruit from everywhere. If you were good enough, then I didn't care who you came from. You're now getting immediate exposure to the USL Championship every single week from May all the way to August. That's how we would plan, because my head was, I'm too stupid to accept that we shouldn't be in the final. Genuinely, that's where my head was. So that's a huge attraction. So even, okay, you'll get exposure in the games, and you'll get some sessions we would have, which is crazy, we had about 45 players in a session. But in those sessions, there's 3 to 4 people better than you on any given day in your position. So you literally had to show up in every training session ready to battle for your position on the weekend, or beat 2 other guys out to get up training with the USL Championship or the MLS team. So it was constant competition. And then the people who didn't want to do that or couldn't handle that, they just kind of fizzled away. But that was also part of what we wanted. We wanted that. We call it whatever you want, but it was pure competition.
Yeah, like a natural filter.
Yes. And a staff who we made it a very conscious decision to not have our biases. No matter how much I've scouted you between August to December in your college season, no matter if you've come as a recommendation from the scouting department of the Union or from Brendan or from Hogan, I didn't care where the people came from. Everyone on day one was treated bang, exact same, and everyone was given the exact same chances. Those who rose to that were constantly in it. And then there'd be certain games we'd pick and we changed the whole 18. So we would give them people chances who have maybe not been in, especially early on. They haven't been in 3 or 4 of the first 18s. Then we'd flip it around and kind of give that group a rest day, let's say, because the schedule's packed. And then they would go train with the first team or train. It was more frequent that those years to be going to Bethlehem Steel. Whereas when I played through, and then kind of Hogan's first 2 years when I was an assistant, it was more so common to go to the first team, Not so, it was just more frequent. But that was the big reason. And then we just in a Reading environment, we just held standards. And our message was the same thing they were hearing with the first team, was the same thing they were hearing with USL Championship. So I felt nothing was confusing, And then if it was confusing or I wasn't delivering it well enough, they could come to me. They could come to my assistant. It was a lot of the days, it was good cop, bad cop. My assistant, Shane Keeley, was a huge reason to the success as well. Because he's just naturally a nice fella, and I'm just naturally an arsehole. So but then we'd flip it some days, right, Keeley, today you'll be the bad guy, I'll be the good guy. When they arrive, which was very rarely, but when they arrive, I'll be all smiling and laughing and joking, So just from the management side, that's what. But yeah, it was standards. No matter what they did, if they were doing a public appearance, they had that Reading badge on them in a school or whatever they were doing. Reading's a small town, so we got to find out everything pretty much. And then there's also times where you got to let them off the leash and let them do whatever they do and blow off smoke, and then bring them back and have a laugh and a joke about it. There was, but yeah, even our top guys. I mean, we kick lads out of training. If and there's days I'd say to Keely, I want it brought to the line. So that was usually a day before the game. We would treat that like the appetizer to the main course. I wanted them brought to the line, and sometimes that resulted in handbags. Sometimes it resulted in a little bit of variables, but they were always ready for the Saturday. There was no one was allowed rest, ourselves included. We wouldn't accept it. It just wasn't allowed. But that was our side, and the biggest attraction and the biggest kind of reinforcement was the fact we were attached to a big part of that pathway. That was our. And I noticed that when we went to Ocean City, when you didn't have that direct contact, it was too easy for people to just fizzle away and just kind of flake out of it, because it's the summer. It's but then the real guys who kicked on now and have had careers and are still having their careers, we were still able to kind of keep them attracted in the summer. So that's the Reading one. That's why it was, and it was owners who backed us and owners who really believed in us. But there was a lot of unknowns when we took it over. A lot of people are obviously, you got to be very aware of your own situation. Is the staff coming in capable? Are they able to do it? And what I loved about it was every time at Reading you'd have Open Cup, usually a Wednesday game, and it was your first game. Well, lads have only come in on the Monday. Some have come in Tuesday, and some have just come in the Wednesday. If you got lucky, you had a couple that came in Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you do like a 6-man session. Or we never had a 10-man session. That would have been like gold dust. But that's what you had to deal with. And then you had to, in my opinion, you wanted to land the message early of how you wanted it to go. You had to get a result. You had to get a result. And I loved all that. I loved it. I thought it was the best part. You had to be so clear with your message, and it forced you to be so clear and simple. Now, was it perfect in those games? No, but we never lost. We never ever lost. So that for me was a sign of, okay, you're definitely attracting good talent, but you're able to get over the line time after time after time. And then these lads are kicking on and are having careers. That's actually what it was all about. And that's the proof. The proof is the numbers of lads progressing on.
You're 3.5 years now at the Switchbacks, but your roles have sort of changed throughout your time. So I'd love to dive into sort of your initial roles and what that has now led to now, and just your time there so far, and then we'll dive into some more Switchbacks, I think. Yeah,
the initial role, I think it was just post-COVID. I think it was it was, because I was remote. I was doing the video analysis while I was still at PBA, with a D2 program. Really loved it. Honestly, loved it at PBA. But then at night time or whenever the games were here, I'd be coming back to do the video analysis live. We do the live tagging on Speedio, and then at the time, so Brendan Hogan Chamber, we had a group chat where then come half time, or if anything was a major standout from the camera's angle, that would be sent, by a text through, and if it didn't make sense over text, just a voice note of what you're seeing, gaps in the opponent, errors by ourselves, or weaknesses that could be seen. So then you get a bit of feedback from that, and you get to see, right, I think a big thing for me is I always want to see, which I know it is 99% of the time I'm talking shite, but if from the people you're actually giving the information to, is it valued, is it applicable, and can it actually affect the game, for the better? Because then, if not, what's the point in doing it? And then it would be post-game analysis and sending kind of a report over. And not always, but sometimes Bren wanted a pre-game a couple of days before, but they used to do that themselves. So that was the first role, and it's remote, so you're kind of feeling, I'm not really a part of it. You know yourself, it's not the same. And then a part of that role too was kind of finding college level players that could come in, or any contacts through what we had at Reading that are maybe still in USL Championship or coming from MLS because they've just been drafted, wanting to move along. So that was part of the role too. And then actually came here then in 22 on the sports performance side. So there was a big change coming in there. There was a big change in small details, put it that way. And the key, my goal was to make sure the limitation of soft tissue injuries, all the preventables. So that was making sure the training load was correct, both from are they able to be fit and available for Saturday, but then can they also outperform the opponent physically and athletically, you know? So we have a huge advantage here, and it's the altitude. So when it comes in, when you've come into it for the first few days, it kicks your ass. And I know that because Brendan put me in the five-a-sides that Mark Michi, having been in Ireland for probably a month and a half, just drinking pints and eating terrible stuff. And yeah, it was once it hits you, it's awful. So teams come into that, you know. So no matter how fit they are, we should always have an advantage. So if we're also athletically superior while using the advantage, well, we should be able to use that every single time we're here at the stadium, you know. And yeah, that year we actually only had one. We had one soft tissue injury, and it was the day all three of us got sent off against Memphis. So one lad came on, didn't warm up correctly, and was rushed onto the pitch, made one sprint and pulled up on the hamstring. So that was one soft tissue injury that affected games. You know, I'm sure during the season in training and stuff, but that was also part of the management, what we needed and had to do. And then we were able to bring Wheeler out of retirement, so that's my biggest. That was my biggest kind of happy moment. Is we went to pre-season, he was coaching, brought me out of retirement, but he was working. Just we were giving him programs for about 3 months up until the May, until he could actually physically come in, and then we had to build him up. And thankfully, he won us games, and he got 2 goals, I think, in the playoff game. He got a last-minute equaliser here at home. That was a big moment. Yeah. So all those pieces, that was that role. And then since then, it's been the assistant, and then this year just adding technical director to that. And yeah, again, only differences are, for me, is the major focus on the small details. I'm just obsessed with small details, because if all of those are consistently correct, well, they all point to the top of the mountain. And if you're getting at least, again, just my head, if you're getting 90 to 95% of the controllables correct, well, then you've got a chance. And if you can add a little bit of whatever it is that your personality, is that your qualifications, is that your secret sauce, whatever that has to be, to then become elite at your level. So I think if you can get to the 90, 95%, so the next couple of percentages, again, if you can dip them in with the consistencies, they're what can make you elite at the level. So the big change for us this year is we've got a big focus on goals conceded, you know, versus my first year here, and Brendan was very open about it. He didn't care if we conceded 100 goals as long as we scored 101. Do you know what I mean? That was actually, and if you watch those games back, they were so transition. There was so much transition, but it suited the style of players that we had, and it suited what he wanted to do. So obviously, if it's more transition here in altitude, the other team most likely is going to break down very, very soon. So the focus has changed from there to be structurally more sound, more ball dominant. And again, if you're more ball dominant in altitude, also the team is chasing. So for us this year, that's been a main focus. And it slightly started last year. You know, we definitely reduced the amount of goals conceded. But I love a 1-0 win. I love it. it shows that you're able to obviously go and score. And we do have players in the building that can allow us to win games 4-3, 5-4. We do have that. But I don't know, just between Chamber and myself, I think we both enjoy a 1-0 more than we do a 5-4. I don't think our blood pressure can handle a game that's 5-4. I also don't think we can handle the last minute winners, just like what Zandy did. I think we'd prefer, a nice 3-0 or 3-1, like many coaches. But that has been the actual intentional switch, I'd say. Just the details. It's just the two of us are obsessed with it. And again, I think if you get them right, players will respond to it and players will see what you're doing. It becomes obvious and then they can buy in. They can actually enjoy it. When I played, if you got a 1-0 win, you were buzzing with the clean sheet, you're buzzing with the win. I keep saying 1-0. We're not just set up to win 1-0. We just so happen that has happened up to now. We got lucky with those two because we were so unlucky when we were 0-5. Those games where it's going in now, it wasn't going in, and we weren't keeping clean sheets. That's the difference. Clean sheets, your structure. For us, anyway, that's what we feel right now has been the big difference. So that's the kind of evolution from all the different roles. I know it's a very long-winded answer, but that is how it's gone. And it's lots of learning. It's just loads of learning. I think if you enjoy learning, this is the perfect place for you.
What's that balance been like now with the technical director role and the assistant coaching role? I think it's actually quite important to have that as a dual role sometimes, I think, because you can sort of see the difference between, okay, I have the first team, I have the academy, you can sort of see how pieces can come in and out of play. So I'm curious how that role has been where you're sort of that dual role and balancing the two.
Yeah, it's not a lot majorly different compared to last year, other than the majority of days, Chambo steps back from the running of the majority of drills. Thursday is usually his day where he does the tactical breakdown of an opponent, if we're in a typical Saturday week. So the only real change is, he took a lot of training last year because he was the assistant last year. Because I'm taking it now, I think, again, being so obsessed with the details, it's you actually hear our players say it in a technical drill. They'll say details. Because from day one of preseason, we hit a heavy focus. And this is from his direction too. Hit a heavy focus on their controllables. So if it's a simple 10x10 box pass and technical exercise and it's 2-touch, well, the touch and the pass better be at game speed and they better be clean. So if you've got 10 actions, we're expecting you 8 to 9 to be exactly how you want it. And then the next time we do that, I'm expecting 9 to 10. And then if it doesn't go right, we actually don't ever expect perfection. We actually don't. But when it doesn't go right, we expect it to be fixed like you'd fix it in the game. Because you can't control everything in the game. So let's say last minute you change the pressing angle from left to right and I have to shift my touch. Okay, so the ball bobbles up. For whatever, it could be a million reasons. The ball bobbles up. But can I quickly get it down, take 3 touches maybe to get it down, roll it, pass. But then that's all at game speed. There's been a huge focus from the start of preseason on little moments like that where you can actually control and mentally you don't switch off in those moments. Think about, the start of the season for us, so many balls rolled across the 6-yard box and our striker mishit it, or it technically hit the post. So like the technical action of finishing, it hit the post instead of going into that gap that the keeper was blatantly giving us. Those small moments is what we were trying to harp on from the start because they affect the game. So if you can technically execute exactly how you want it in that moment, you've won the game 1-0. Do you know what I mean? Whereas at the start of the year, look at the Miami game, our very first game, we hit the post. Quincy has a chance back post off a corner and his finish actually ends up back with the player who took the corner. Whereas if you know Quincy, he can technically execute that 9 times out of 10 with his eyes closed. So for us, again, devil in the details, that's been the big shift for us. Just And not that it wasn't a focus in the past, but it's just a main priority. And then holding them accountable to their controllables, just like what we do with the academy lads. So we've got Keelan Power in as well, who's been running through in the academy, and they are doing the drills our first team are doing, and that's what we learned from when we were at Reading and Steel and Union. You know, you make sure that the Reading boys and the Steel boys are doing the exact same drills and sessions that the first team is, because if they do well and progress up to the level, well, they're in a session and they're very, very familiar with the drill. They don't have to relearn the drill. Now they've no excuse.
It just becomes speed
yeah,
of play.
Yeah, and muscle memory. And if you can get that speed of play while technically executing, that's exactly. You'll hear that phrase repeated a lot here. Details and speed of play for us, which can be applied then when we do, let's say on a Wednesday, our extensive day, when we do our transition drills, exact same. If we're 4v3 in that transition, the percentages are in your favour. The only thing that's going to stop you is if you slow that down or technically don't execute. You know? So obviously awareness comes into that too, but they've that's been the difference when your original question that asking like the balancing the two, I think they both mesh together. So like I agree, it almost has to be a dual role, because if you're running the session as the assistant coach and I'm off to the side as the technical director, I don't know. Just for me that wouldn't work. You know.
What's a big misconception either about your role or just that you notice in the football industry as a whole that you can sort of find like an answer to? Like some people might be looking at it with a different angle, and you see that quite often.
I think from the coaching side, a lot of people, even at our level, don't understand the pressure that can be put on players, staff, and then a whole team. Whether that's pressure from fans, from ownership, all that kind of stuff. You know, if you look at the top level, obviously you hear in the media, there's pressure on the managers. But then when you actually see the real life effect of it on that man, that woman, their family, the people around them, some staff members around. So the one thing I hate the most, I hate it. If a head coach has pressure for his job and an assistant or someone in his staff, per staff, tries to submarine them and get them out so then that they can get the job, sickens me. I hate it. It's rubbish. It's a real cowardice act. I should be there to take your job as the assistant, but we should do that as we've done so well that the head coach moves on, the assistant moves on. And whether they move on together to somewhere else or whatever. I would say the same to Keely, my assistant at Reading. Keely, your job is to be here to take my job. And this is how we'll do it. But that's a we. And then he's got to pass that on to hopefully, if you've taught them correctly or you've at least worked with them correctly, that's the way it should be. But yeah, the misconception that at this level, you know, jobs being lost doesn't affect that human and the families. At the top level, it's easy because they'll get $1 million, $15 million payoff. Jose Mourinho, brilliant. They're getting paid off, right? But at these levels, and actually the majority of levels around the world, the financials are not at that level. So the loss of a job, pressure it brings on the family, all that kind of stuff at these levels, it's brutal. You know, it can be life changing. And a couple of coaches at this level this year have lost theirs, and I'm sure at 0-5 everyone's calling for our heads. You know, and I make sure that's our heads because it's all on us. It's not just on one person. And you know, had that happened to us, it would have been life changing. So that's a big piece. You know.
We spoke about your childhood in Ireland, growing up there, and then obviously now you've been able to spend your collegiate years in the US and now even longer coaching. I'm curious the biggest sort of lesson or learning that we can take from Irish culture in North America. Obviously, I'm on the Canadian side of the border, but I think we share a lot of similarities. So I'm curious, now that you've been able to experience both sides, I'm curious a lesson or maybe just a form of culture or tradition that we can bring over to the US and maybe take as a learning or as a lesson.
From the football side, the first thing I immediately noticed when I went to play in the college side out here, because we had, I think we 4 or 5 Irish lads in the starting 11. We had an Irish coach and an Irish assistant coach. I don't know how that happened, but we weren't as talented as the teams we came up against. But we were aggressive. We were very vocal. So the organisation, especially up the spine, and there was kind of not on purpose, but there was a kind of in each game a fearlessness going in, because I trusted that fella rather than worrying about the result. You know, I see a lot of worrying out here. So this is just from the football side. I see a lot of worrying out here and make mistakes, and definitely now. But I don't think this is just the US. I think this is worldwide with the football. Less vocal players. That's definitely happening. And the aggressiveness, I know for a fact that with the 5 of us, the aggressiveness scared teams that we played against, you know. I mean, I'd little David Fallon next to me as a centre back, and you'd swear he was 7 foot tall. Now he wasn't. He was 5 foot nothing. But he flew into tackles, fearless. He would put his head where some people wouldn't put their feet. And I loved playing with him because of that. Because people were actually genuinely afraid to go up against that. And a little bit of that is what I was talking to you earlier about with Dylan Clark here. Dylan Clark has kind of moulded his way into that. He's fearless in the tackle now. 1v1 defensively. I mean, he's stopping our contracted USL Championship players defensively, our wingers. He's stopping them. And now he's vocal. He's a leader. He's organised, and especially even in the first sessions, but especially when he plays in those college level games or in the academy level games. And again, I told you earlier, we were using him as the example for the kids coming through. So that's the football side. I just think from a cultural side, from people, we just don't care. Like, we'll have a laugh. You make fun of me, I'll make fun of you. That's our love language, you know. I'm not going to be sitting here telling you you're the best thing in the world. If I really like you, I'm going to slaughter you and make fun of you. And if you don't give it back to me, well, then you're boring. You know. Don't be getting so offended by everything. Just relax and make fun of each other in the right way and have fun. Like, you can have fun even in the serious situations. We do it all the time out here, you know. Usually the chamber doesn't usually like it, but usually right after the national anthem or before the game, there'll be something you can spot either in the crowd or in the lineup, something that can be made fun of. Try and pick it out and have a bit of a laugh. But he doesn't listen to me, or he just doesn't want to get involved in it. But I don't know. It's just, you have to enjoy what you're doing as well.
What is one aspect of your career that you're looking at now and you're looking to improve or change, maybe a way you do a certain tactical shape, or even just something in your day-to-day work that you're trying to either change or adjust, or something that you're working on?
Yeah, it's not from a football side. It's more so with the people. It's can I as best possible learn the people I'm working with every single day, whether that be players, staff in our office, or staff in the front office. Because the more I can learn about them, the more I can build a relationship. The more we can build the relationships, the more then you can actually create that club feeling of what we grew up with in Ireland, you know. And I think it's the bigger clubs, what they attract and what they mean to cities, you know, that well, a lot of these USL Championship clubs haven't been here for 30 years, you know, or 100 years, like what some of the German, Spanish, English clubs have been. So I think if we can create a kind of emotional attachment internally, that will reflect to the fans. And our July 4th game was a big one for that. We had a lot of fans coming up saying they've noticed the difference, that it's changing towards something similar to what you'd see. They mentioned England, like down in the lower league. So that's a real compliment, because that's been a big piece of, if the players can attach to us, with a relationship, and then they can attach to the club, that's a huge piece. So that's been a big focus. And a big part of that is just, Chamber says it all the time, it only costs you time and effort. It doesn't cost you millions of dollars to go and learn about one of the players' families. What do they like to do? Is there anything we can help? We obviously don't want to intrude, and we don't want to get in their space, but is there small little things we can help with off the field? We try to intentionally find out those details to then help with life, especially if this isn't home, which it's not for a lot of lads. They've come from a different country or a different state, or it's their first time here in Colorado, things like that. What can we do to, when they initially get here, what can we do to welcome them? What can we do to help them if, I don't know, if their wife wants to work in a certain industry? Is there any avenues we can open up? Do their kids want to go to a certain school? Just things that matter in life to them. So if I can intentionally learn that, and Chambers the same, if we can intentionally learn what that is, well, that's part of building the relationship. Well, now that player and that player's family hopefully will start to grow an attachment to the club. And if the fans and the owners can see that the players have an attachment or a love for the club, and they'll give you that extra bit, well, I think that it can only go positive. It really can, especially if they fit what the club are wanting to do from a football standpoint. But yeah, that's been the main focus over the last 2 years, and really, really intentionally building that. And I love Chambers' words. It only costs time and effort.
If someone's listening to the conversation now and is quite inspired by either your career that we've spoken through, or even just your time now and sort of some of the points that you've gotten to, I'd love to hear advice for someone like that from you, and kind of a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah, well, if you're going to take the road less traveled, let's say, which is kind of what this is, I think it has to be our everything. Like for me, it is, and it was to get to this point. But I'm also, at any of these points where we got into, I've also not sat back and gone, "Oh, made it." Not at all. I think that's a big one too. I've been willing to do whatever it took to at each stepping point. I've worked for no money, worked for where I've paid to be there, worked for, scholarship, worked for very less money. A lot of people that I've come across in the industry anyway are so focused on how much they're getting paid. Especially if you're still very young and starting off, forget the money. Seriously, forget it. Can you either have the freedom to make mistakes, find an environment that you have the freedom to make mistakes and learn from them, or have a really good mentor that can teach you and allow you to, dip your toe in the water and slowly earn responsibility, where you get to see that my ideas are working or they're not working, because learning what not to do is just as helpful as what learning to do. But if you never learn one or the other, I don't think you're fully learning. You have to learn how to fail. You have to learn how to be successful. And if you're not putting in the time and the effort and making the sacrifices, then it's not for you. It's just not. Again, coming through the amount of coaches I've come across, and they were definitely better than me, or had a higher level of playing, had more resources, and they're looking at all the reasons why they couldn't do it. Like in the summers, I packed up and left West Palm to go and be in Reading full time without going back. Maybe 1/4 of July I went back for 2 or 3 days. But then you're there. I lived on the dorms with them to be immersed with it. Do you know? And I think if you fully immerse yourself in it and show you're willing to do what you're asking the players to do, then it's for you. You know, this has been my everything, because I felt if I was giving it everything, well, then it will get us somewhere eventually. You know, and then you start to get small bits of success in terms of, use my exact scenario. Hogan has to go and do a first team game with Bethlehem Steel. So now the game plan for the weekend is left with you, the assistant. So that's now a chance to go and show, right, well, you can't go too far from his philosophy, his game plan, but what can you implement that helps the group? What can you, and then you get a small bit of success and you go, okay, I was wrong in my communication here, or I was good here, and you carry that on, you know. So yeah, and I'm always willing to learn, which when I was younger that was not the case. Too stubborn. Not as a coach, as a player. And even as a coach today, I'm very stubborn on certain things. So certain beliefs I won't bend on. But 99% of everything else I'm willing to learn and willing to get wrong. But I won't get it wrong twice. You know, won't get it wrong twice. Because you have to, here at this level now, you won't get away with getting it wrong twice. You know, you just won't. So I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there, but that's if somebody's young and willing to immerse themselves in it, not worry about the money, and they focus more on the learning, and then they have the ability, you know, then that's for me anyway, that's been the secret sauce. But I'm still learning. I still haven't got all the answers. That's just what's worked for me. And then there's a small bit of luck along the way. You know, it hits the post here or it goes in there, and people say, "Oh, you're great," versus "You're shy." That's the game, though. I think every person, whether they're a player or a coach, needs a little bit of luck. Definitely.
We have our last question here. Then we'll get into some quick fire questions. I want to know, if we look 5 to 10 years in the future, what is one goal or dream that you're currently focused on now, working towards in that sort of time frame that you're looking to complete?
What was it, 5 to 10?
5 to 10 years, yeah.
Pro license, definitely. Still, I got my pro license. That's been on my goal tree. I was actually coaching a youth team in Florida, and one of the parents gave me a really small book, and in the book, you created a goal tree. This was during COVID. And the A license was at the time, and then pro license was down the line. But I still can't apply for it. They're still waiting for, you have to be an MLS assistant or a head coach here at this level. So I will get it, just not yet. Waiting for the time. And then I'm honestly not obsessed with being a head coach. I'm not obsessed with being an assistant coach. I would like to be MLS or further, which I know is a bit crazy the way the pathway's going, but you have to have ambitions to keep moving forward. Mm-hmm. And like I said to you, at every single step been through, I've never sat back and gone, "Ooh, made it." So there's always something higher. There really is. So something higher right now is MLS. And then reach there, something higher than that is a higher level around the world, anywhere, you know. So I don't think, no matter where I'll be, I'm never going to sit back and have a cigar out. It's just not going to happen. And then the actual eventual goal is to be 95 or 100 and dying on the pitch, and I'm not gonna come up with like, obviously physically and mentally by then, whether you can do it or not, you got to be self-aware of that and have people around you who are honest and willing enough to go, no, step away. So then you help in another way, help whatever. But this is not a job to me, and I think that's what's part of why I've been willing to do everything we've been able to do. This is not work. I don't mind a 14-hour day. I don't mind travelling to the back arse of nowhere, you know, for a tournament or for whatever. I don't mind it at all. And some people hate it. And they hate that part of the job, but they're just kind of thinking, well, what are you doing the job for then? You know? But that's, they'd be the goals. Definitely pro license is the immediate one. And then it's as high can be. We're no matter the level, always strive for higher.
We'll wrap things up here with some quick fire questions. The first one here: do you have a favorite quote or saying, something that you just always look to for motivation?
There's not one I go by, but daily. Here, I got one. Hang on.
No
daily ones do come up, and one today I liked was the road to nowhere is paved with excuses. That's a good one because there's plenty of excuse makers in this industry.
If we're looking for top recommendations in Colorado, someone's coming to the Colorado Springs, what's one recommendation you have, whether it's a food spot or just something you have to go see?
Why not fail? Switchbacks game.
There we go. I love it. Why not? And what is one way that you recharge or you get re-inspired out of work? So if we finally take a step back from the footballing side of things, what's one way to get back into the swing of things?
Well, we just had the 4-day break, so I did a lot of watching games, sitting on the couch, watching programs. But for me, it's usually in the off season. It would be you get back into a workout regime that you can work on daily, and part of that then is a big piece I'm big on, whether they're audiobooks or podcasts. The high performance podcasts are fantastic. All those types of things where something I can learn from daily. And then you can go, okay, well, and reflect on last season, really, really poor with that. Maybe this world elite athlete, swimmer, or whatever it is, they have a training method or a meditation method or something that they do mentally that we think, oh, that can either help the group of players or that can help us as a staff. So in the off season, that's genuinely what it is. And it's just a daily routine. And then by the time January comes around, you're itching to get going again, you know. That for me is what works. But yeah, the shorter term is just I was just sitting watching more football.
Why not? It's hard to get sick of it. The last one here: if you could sit down with one person for a meal, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Yeah, my grandmother. On my mother's side, but don't even have to hesitate. Just a larger than life woman who, especially towards her last few years, became like Dublin famous, became famous a little bit in Ireland for being herself, just being funny and crazy and brilliant and all those things wrapped into one. But yeah, we grew up with her, and one of the, if not the best person to ever come across. So the dinner would be funny, entertaining, there'd be stories. It would just be so worth your time. Yeah, without a doubt.
Alan, I really appreciate your time. It was a great talk. A little bit of a longer one now that we've gone through everything. If there's any last words from your end, and then we can wrap things up.
No, just honestly, thanks for having me on, Chad. It's hopefully it can be of a help to at least one person. If something can be taken of it, great. Hopefully it's not a complete waste of your time, and something good can come of it.
No worries. No, it was a great conversation. I really appreciate your time, and we'll speak soon.
Cheers, Chad.